You think you know war? You think you've seen empires rise and fall? Then listen. Because this is the story of how humanity ripped the galaxy's carefully constructed illusions to shreds and showed them what real war looked like. It started with a voice, cold and dripping with contempt, echoing across every frequency the USS Valiant could monitor. Commander Jake Morrison felt his blood chill, not from the words themselves, but from the sheer, casual arrogance. The Galactic Council, they called themselves, speaking to humanity like slow, fumbling children taking their first steps. They'd been amused by our crude ships and our clumsy reach for the stars. Now, they were done playing. Submit to their authority in 30 days, or face their correction. The word hung in the Valiant's bridge like a silk noose. Jake forwarded the message to Earth, a grim smile playing on his lips. He'd fought in the Mars colonies, seen what happened when you underestimated human stubbornness. These aliens were about to get a painful lesson. Back on Earth, deep beneath Geneva, President Helen Carter sat in her fortified command center. She played the message 3 times, each replay solidifying the icy resolve in her gut. These aliens, these self-proclaimed masters of the galaxy, had decided humanity's fate without knowing a damn thing about us. They saw primitive newcomers and assumed primitive minds. Admiral Richard Blake, a man whose voice carried the weight of 40 years defending Earth, spoke first. He'd commanded forces on Titan, watched soldiers fight in conditions that should have killed them in minutes. He knew what humans did when survival was the only option. We prepare for war, he told the president, while we talk peace. They aren't expecting a real fight. And that, he said, was our one advantage. Surprise! The Galactic Council was dominated by 2 titans, the Kryn Empire, reptilian warriors who'd waged war across 100 systems for 3 millennia, slow and patient, thorough to the bone. And the Vesh Collective, insectoid swarms that flooded battlefields like living tides. High strategist Zathor of the Kryn reviewed humanity's military records. He saw our world wars, our nuclear weapons, our unsophisticated tactics. He found it amusing. What he missed, what his superior intelligence division utterly failed to grasp, were the colonial wars. The brutal, desperate struggles fought in the asteroid belts, in the vacuum of space, in the crushing gravity of outer moons. Wars where humanity learned to kill efficiently, quietly, and ruthlessly in the void. Zathor presented his analysis to a grand assembly. Humanity, aggressive, yes, but unsophisticated. Their weapons, powerful, but inelegant. Their tactics, brave, but lacking refinement. The Vesh representative chimed in, adding that human ships were functional, but ugly. Built like tools, not proper warships. The council laughed. 1,000 species had joined their order, some willingly, others after a demonstration. Humanity, they were certain, would be the latter. They had no idea the tools we built were forged in fire, not gilded for show. President Carter convened her own council. The discussion was blunt. Surrender and lose everything we'd fought for? Try diplomacy with aliens who just delivered an ultimatum? Or fight? Blake put it starkly, they expect submission or a brief demonstration. They are not expecting a real fight. And that, he concluded, was our only card. Then he revealed Project Thunderchild. It had consumed resources for a decade. While the rest of our fleet were explorers with weapons bolted on, the USS Thunderchild was built for one purpose: war. Real war. The kind humanity had practiced on itself for millennia. Captain Lisa Grant received her orders directly from Blake. 38, sharp as a razor, with a record that spoke volumes. She'd led ground forces through Martian tunnel systems, where battles were decided in heartbeats. She'd commanded a destroyer in the brutal Titan Ice Wars, where the cold was as deadly as any enemy. She knew how to win when winning seemed impossible. Blake watched her face as she took in the Thunderchild. It wasn't beautiful. Council ships were ornate, ceremonial. The Thunderchild was a predator. Every surface served a function. Every weapon was positioned for maximum effect. No wasted space, no aesthetic flourishes. This was a ship built by a species that knew war intimately, forged in the crucible of survival. Grant toured the vessel, met her crew. Lieutenant Commander Pete Hansen, 3 tours in the belt conflicts. Chief Engineer Amy Sullivan, who'd designed half the ship's systems after losing her last vessel to corporate raiders. Weapons Officer Danny Wright, who hadn't just trained on every system, he'd invented 2 new ones. They were veterans, every last one, and they understood what was coming. The aliens thought they were masters of war. They were about to learn the difference between practicing war as an art form and surviving war as a daily reality. President Carter sent humanity's response to the Galactic Council. The message was brief, stark, and utterly defiant: humanity accepts your challenge. Coordinates were attached. The Kepler Expanse. 30 days. 1 human ship against whatever the Council wished to send. Winner takes all. Zathor read the message. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something akin to doubt. Not about victory, his fleet was vastly superior, but a cold unease. Did these humans even comprehend what they were agreeing to? He assembled a demonstration fleet, 40 warships. An overwhelming force, certainly, for teaching a lesson. Surely they would see sense when they arrived. He ordered the battle broadcast across all Council space. Let everyone see what happened when you challenged the established order. Submit or be destroyed. On the bridge of the Thunderchild, Lisa Grant watched the final systems flicker to life. Pete Hansen reported readiness. Amy Sullivan confirmed the reactor was operating beyond specification. Danny Wright's weapons board glowed green. Ready. Lisa thought about the battles she'd fought. Martian tunnels, Frozen Titan, the ambush in the belt where her destroyer was outnumbered 5-1 and survived through tactics that would have gotten her failed out of any academy. She knew war wasn't about honor, rules, or looking impressive. War was about making the other side stop fighting, by any means necessary. The Council was about to learn what humanity meant by war. Zathor stood in his flagship's command center, a wave of satisfaction washing over him. 40 warships, hanging in perfect formation. Centuries of military tradition. Beautiful, terrible, and exactly what 3,000 years of doctrine prescribed. They waited in the Kepler Expanse, running lights blazing, power generators humming, a magnificent, intimidating display. Any species with sense would look upon this and understand the futility of resistance. Across the void, Lisa Grant conducted her final briefing. She didn't speak of glory. She spoke of survival. Pete Hansen reiterated the plan: Thunderchild would enter battlespace at maximum velocity and immediately go on the attack. Speed. Aggression. The same tactics that won humanity's forgotten colonial wars. Amy Sullivan permitted herself a tight smile. Her reactor system was running at 115% of its maximum specification. The Council's intelligence on human tech was clearly based on outdated commercial vessels. They had no idea what the Thunderchild could do. Danny Wright was in his element: railguns accelerating solid projectiles to relativistic speeds, nuclear missiles, point defense grids that could throw up walls of ballistic fire, and the newest terror, plasma lances focusing fusion reactions into coherent beams. Every weapon tested, refined, and made deadly in the vicious, no-holds-barred wars of the solar system. Lisa walked the ship, speaking to her crew. They were scared. Good. Fear kept you sharp. But they were also confident. They'd fought before, not in ceremonial dances, but in desperate, brutal struggles where losing meant death and winning meant surviving to fight another day. In Council space, Observer Trill Nack submitted his final report: humans were aggressive, technologically capable, but lacked sophistication in large-scale space warfare. Predictable. He looked at our world wars and saw massive armies. He missed the industrial logistics, the ability to churn out war machines. He looked at ancient naval battles and missed the lessons of maneuver and concentration of force. He saw nuclear weapons as indiscriminate destruction, missing the terrifying precision we'd learned to wield them with in the colony wars. The Council's wars were different. Rules. Traditions. Declarations. Fleets positioned by doctrine. Predictable patterns. Casualties regrettable, but managed. Wars ended with treaties and ceremonies. Civilized. Humanity's wars were not civilized. They were desperate struggles for resources, for survival. No rules but winning. No traditions but adapting. No patterns but the relentless drive to destroy the other side. The Council fought wars as a form of politics. Humanity fought wars as if their very existence depended on it. Because, often, it did. Zathor held a final war council. His strategy, the Karnath maneuver, a formation that had ended conflicts for 900 years. Surround, scan, final surrender offer. Disable, not destroy. That would be wasteful. His subordinates nodded. The plan was sound. Traditional. It always worked. On the Thunderchild, Lisa Grant studied the same tactical data and saw something entirely different. A fleet arranged for intimidation, not combat. Ships designed for show, not function. Commanders who'd never faced an opponent who ignored their precious rules. Pete Hansen pointed out the gaps, not obvious ones, but weak points in their overlapping fields of fire. Kryn ships, powerful but slow. Vesh carriers, dangerous, but vulnerable. Support vessels, barely armed. Amy Sullivan confirmed the Thunderchild's acceleration capacity exceeded anything in Council intelligence reports. They could be faster. Much faster. That meant initiative. That meant choosing when and where to fight. Danny Wright highlighted something critical: Council energy shields dispersed heat and radiation. Effective against energy weapons, yes. Useless against solid projectiles moving fast enough to carry kinetic energy measured in megatons. Lisa made her decision. They would not fight the battle the Council expected. They would not fight by Council rules. They would fight the way humanity fought when survival was at stake. Fast. Brutal. And without mercy. The 30 days passed. The Council fleet waited, gleaming, magnificent, bright. The Thunderchild approached the Kepler expanse running dark, a whisper of power, a shadow where their enemy blazed. Barely there until it was almost on top of them. Then it appeared. One human warship against 40 Council vessels. Small, dark, silent. Zathor felt a flicker of disappointment. Only one ship. He'd hoped for a fleet, for a more impressive demonstration. One ship seemed almost too easy. But orders were orders. Lessons must be taught. He opened a channel, his prepared speech flowing, diplomatic, firm, magnanimous. He spoke of the Council's long history, its military supremacy. Offered one final chance for humans to see reason. Resistance was futile, but mercy was still possible. The speech lasted 20 minutes, one of his better efforts, he felt. He waited for the human response. Captain Lisa Grant listened to the entire speech, her face expressionless. The bridge was silent, save for the hum of combat-ready systems. When the alien commander finally finished, Lisa leaned forward, her voice a low growl into the comm system. 2 words. Not a plea. Not a threat. Not a noble speech. Simple. Clear. Weapons free. The Thunderchild accelerated like nothing Zathor had ever seen. His tactical displays updated frantically as the human ship went from relative stillness to a velocity that should have been impossible. His science officer reported the readings 3 times, unable to believe them. Lisa Grant sat calm, the G-forces pushing her back into her seat. The Thunderchild's inertial dampeners, forged in the Belt Wars, held firm. The crew felt the pressure, but they were trained for it. The Council fleet began its standard encirclement, a maneuver practiced countless times, executed with ingrained grace. It looked impressive. It would have been devastating against an opponent who cooperated. The Thunderchild was not where their tactical computers predicted. Pete Hansen had plotted an approach vector that ignored every single military doctrine the Council knew. The ship juked and shifted like a fighter craft despite its size, bursts of maneuvering thrust tearing at the void, tearing at the Council's expectations. Danny Wright didn't wait for a formal engagement. His targeting solution locked. He fired. The railguns, mounted along the Thunderchild's spine, spoke with the voice of pure physics. Solid projectiles, each weighing tons, accelerated down magnetic rails to relativistic speeds. They crossed the distance in seconds. The first Kryn cruiser never knew what hit it. Its energy shields activated, dispersing heat as designed. The kinetic projectile ignored them. Solid matter at near-light speeds carried energy no energy field could simply disperse. It punched through the shields, through the ornate armored hull, through the interior, and out the other side. The cruiser seemed to pause, then secondary explosions ripped through it. 2 more Council ships died in the first salvo. A Vesh carrier's fighter bay erupted, consuming half the vessel. A support ship simply broke apart. Alarms shrieked across Zether's flagship. His tactical officer reported the impossible. 3 ships destroyed. Not disabled, destroyed. In the first seconds of combat. The weapons, listed in their database as primitive mass drivers, were anything but. They were too fast, hit too hard. Lisa Grant allowed herself a tight smile. The railguns performed exactly as designed. Amy Sullivan's team had pushed the magnetic acceleration to limits civilian safety inspectors would never approve. But this wasn't a civilian vessel. Effectiveness trumped safety. The Council fleet tried to adjust. Zathor ordered them to tighten formation, concentrate fire. The correct tactical response, according to 3,000 years of doctrine. The Thunderchild dodged. Pete Hansen executed evasive pattern Delta 7, a chaotic series of acceleration burns and vector changes that seemed random, but was meticulously calculated. It was a pattern developed during the asteroid belt conflicts, where pirates used the asteroids themselves for cover. It had no predictability because it was designed to have none. Council ships turned, their targeting systems failing to predict the Thunderchild's next move. Energy beams lanced through empty space. Missiles chased ghosts. The Vesh commander saw his fleet failing. He launched his fighters. Thousands of small, agile craft poured from the carriers, a living tide. A tactic that had won battles for the Vesh for a millennium. Individually fragile, but in such numbers, they could overwhelm anything. The swarm accelerated. Lieutenant Sarah Clean watched the approaching wave. The Thunderchild's point defense grid roared to life, turning the space around the human vessel into a sphere of death. Hundreds of automated gun systems tracked and fired, streams of armor-piercing rounds ripping through the void. The Vesh pilots were brave, skilled, but bravery meant nothing against a wall of metal. Fighter after fighter died. They tried to evade, but the targeting computers anticipated every move. They tried to overwhelm, but the ammunition reserves were designed for extended engagement. In 5 minutes, half the fighter wing was destroyed. The survivors broke off, retreating in disarray. Their formation shattered, their morale with it. Zathor felt something new. Not doubt this time. Fear. Real, primal fear. The humans weren't fighting like any opponent he'd ever faced. No honorable combat. No recognizable doctrine. Just movement. And killing. With terrifying, brutal efficiency. He ordered his fleet to execute the Cormouth formation, an ancient pattern, infallible. Every ship would fire simultaneously, a sphere of inescapable energy. It required precise positioning, exact timing. But it had never failed. Lisa Grant watched the Council ships reposition. She recognized the pattern. She'd studied it. More importantly, she'd studied how to break it. The formation required specific positions, time to coordinate, and a relatively stationary or predictable target. She would give them none of those. Danny Wright launched a spread of missiles. Not at the ships, but at specific points in space. These weren't conventional warheads. Each carried an electromagnetic pulse device. They detonated in a carefully timed sequence. The EMP waves washed over the Council fleet. Shields protected the hulls, but their tight beam communications, vital for coordination, were severed. Each commander suddenly fought alone, unable to coordinate. The Cormouth formation collapsed before it could fire a single shot. Now, Lisa Grant showed the Council what humanity meant by aggressive warfare. The Thunderchild didn't retreat. It accelerated directly into the disordered Council fleet. At point-blank range, Danny Wright unleashed everything. Railguns fired continuously. Missiles streamed out. Plasma lances burned through the void, focusing fusion reactions into beams that melted armor plate like paper. Council ships died, not with cinematic drama, but with the sudden, brutal finality of modern combat. One moment, a ship was there. The next, debris. The Kryn prided themselves on heavy armor. The railguns didn't care. The Vesh relied on numbers. Numbers meant nothing when each shot killed. A Kryn cruiser managed a firing solution, energy beams striking the Thunderchild's hull. The armor held. Humanity had learned about armor in the Belt Wars, shrugging off repurposed mining lasers. The Council's energy weapons were sophisticated, but not more powerful. This armor was designed by people who knew what real weapons looked like. Pete Hansen kept the ship moving, a shark through a school of fish, killing, moving, killing again. The crew worked with the precision of a single organism. Amy Sullivan kept the power flowing. Danny Wright kept the weapons firing. Sarah Clean kept the point defense active. Lisa Grant kept them all alive. Zathor watched his fleet die around him. 20 ships gone. 10 more crippled. Humans had done in minutes what should have been impossible. His hand trembled toward the comm console. He needed to send a message. They needed to know. The humans weren't primitives. They weren't unsophisticated. They were predators. And the Council had just learned what it felt like to be prey. His transmission was brief, his voice shaking. Send reinforcements. Send everyone. Nothing in 3,000 years of military history prepared the Council for fighting humanity. Then his flagship's weapons spoke one final time. The Thunderchild rolled, dodged, and fired back. Zathor learned the final lesson of the day: when you threaten humans, they do not negotiate. They fight. The recording reached Council space within hours. They watched it 3 times before anyone spoke. High Council leader Marvan, Ancient Eldery, watched 3,000 years of military tradition crumble in minutes. She watched the survivors retreat while the human ship pursued them like a hunting animal. The Council chamber erupted. Kryn delegates demanded immediate, overwhelming response. Vesh demanded retaliation. But other voices counseled caution. The Quillix delegation pointed out the obvious: one human ship. What would a fleet do? The initial intelligence reports were catastrophically wrong. Humanity wasn't primitive. They were something far more dangerous. Marvan, who had led the Council for longer than most species present had possessed spaceflight, raised a hand. Silence. She spoke a truth many didn't want to hear: the Council had never fought a real war. Not in 3,000 years. They'd fought conflicts, yes, destroyed opponents. But those opponents accepted the same basic rules, traditions, honor, ceremonial combat. The Council had perfected the art of intimidation and ritualized warfare. They had not perfected actual survival combat. She pulled up humanity's history. Not the sanitized version. The real history. 5,000 years of unending conflict. Wars that consumed continents. Technological races born from desperation. Tactics developed not in academies, but in the brutal laboratory of combat, where failure meant extinction. The Kryn had fought across 100 systems for 3,000 years. Impressive. Humanity had fought itself across one planet for 5,000. They had developed every form of warfare. Learned logistics from armies of millions. Tactics from conflicts where the losing side was annihilated. They learned to win, because losing wasn't survivable. The Council fell silent. They were facing a species that had evolved in constant conflict. Every human advance had a military application. Every tactical doctrine had been tested in combat where failure meant death. The Council fought wars as a form of politics. Humanity fought wars as a form of existence. Admiral Richard Blake stood on Earth, allowing himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Thunderchild's victory was more complete than even his optimistic projections. But he was too experienced to celebrate. This was just the opening move. The Council would respond, and next time, it wouldn't be a demonstration fleet. It would be a real war fleet. President Helen Carter's military council met. What now? They'd proven they could fight. Now they needed to prove they could win. The Council had thousands of ships. Humanity had 12 battleships, 40 cruisers, 100 support vessels. The math of traditional warfare was not favorable. But Blake cut in, traditional warfare is exactly what we will not fight. The Council expected open battle. Humanity would fight as smaller forces always fought larger ones, hit and run, ambush, target supply lines, make victory meaningless. Lisa Grant was promoted to Commodore, given command of the 1st Strike Group, 5 battleships, including the Thunderchild. Her orders were clear: hurt the Council wherever she could. Destroy supplies. Sink ships. Show them that controlling human space would cost more blood than they were willing to spend. Other commanders received similar orders. Earth was going to war. And they were going to fight it on human terms. The Council assembled Supreme Commander Vokesh to lead their response. A decorated Vesh officer, 40 years combat experience, never lost a battle. He studied the Thunderchild recordings with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He saw patterns others missed. Humans didn't value their ships the way Council species did, they risked them recklessly. They didn't fight for glory, they fought to win, and nothing else mattered. No respect for tradition. They adapted constantly. Vokesh began developing new training protocols, modifying ships with kinetic shielding, faster maneuvering. But his vessels were built for centuries of Council warfare, for formation fighting. He could modify training, but he couldn't redesign the fundamental nature of his fleet. Lisa Grant led her strike group out of Earth space. Target, the Kellner system, a major Council shipyard, defended by 20 warships. Standard doctrine challenged the defenders. Lisa had no intention of doing anything standard. Her 5 battleships jumped into Kellner at high velocity, timed for a shift change at the shipyard. They didn't slow down. They didn't broadcast challenges. They launched every missile they carried, targeted the shipyard and the defending ships with railguns and plasma lances, then jumped back out of the system before the defenders could organize a response. The entire attack lasted 14 minutes. The shipyard crippled. 5 defending ships destroyed. 3 severely damaged. The human strike group vanished, without a single casualty. Vokesh received the report. He understood the true scope of his problem. The humans would not face him in the kind of battle he could win. Other human commanders adopted similar tactics. Captain Ryan Mitchell specialized in ambushing patrol fleets, waiting silent in deep space, firing from ambush, vanishing. Commander Beth Harper's destroyers laid mines at key jump points, funneling Council ships into kill zones. The Council started losing ships. Not in grand, glorious battles, but in small, vicious engagements where 3 or 4 Council vessels would simply disappear. The mathematics of the war shifted. The Council had thousands of ships, yes, but spread across hundreds of systems. Humanity had fewer, but they were concentrated, mobile, and utterly unpredictable. Council member species began arguing. The Kryn still demanded total war, but their losses mounted. The Vesh wanted to strike Earth directly, but every attempt to gather a fleet was delayed by human attacks on supply lines and staging areas. Smaller species began to question if this war was worth fighting at all. Marvan made a decision that shocked many. She would seek peace. Not surrender, not compromise at first, just a meeting. She personally requested a meeting with President Helen Carter in neutral space. Unprecedented. The meeting was held aboard a neutral station, both sides heavily armed, deeply suspicious. Marvan spoke first. She acknowledged the Council had underestimated humanity. She offered a peace treaty, recognizing human sovereignty, a seat on the Council. In exchange, humanity would cease hostilities. Helen Carter listened, then made her counter. Full independence. No council jurisdiction over human affairs. Reparations for the costs of war. And most importantly, the council would publicly acknowledge that they were not the galaxy's supreme military power, and that other species had the right to defend themselves without council permission. Marvan understood immediately. That last demand struck at the very heart of council authority. 3,000 years built on military supremacy. Admitting weakness could destabilize everything. But continuing the war was bleeding them dry. The humans showed no sign of stopping. The negotiations paused. In space, the war continued. Vokesh prepared his final gambit. Lisa Grant prepared her response, trusting that the council still didn't understand what they were facing. The fate of human independence, and the future of the Galactic Council, would be decided soon. Supreme Commander Vokesh studied the tactical display with satisfaction. He tried to keep his composure. 80 ships. More than he had ever commanded. Weeks spent developing new tactics. Ships modified. Crews trained day and night. This time, it would be different. The target, New Aurora Colony, 50,000 humans on the edge of their space. He wouldn't destroy it. He'd threaten it. Force them to defend it. Draw out their fleet to a battle where his numbers would finally matter. Humans valued their civilians. He knew that much. They would come. And he would be waiting. His fleet dropped out of FTL, a terrifying display of force. He issued his challenge: face him in battle, or watch the colony burn. 6 hours to respond. Captain Lisa Grant read the message aboard the Thunderchild. Pete Hansen saw a faint, chilling smile cross her face. The council commander thought he was clever. Psychological warfare, forcing humans into a bad tactical position by threatening civilians. It would have been clever against an opponent who panicked. Lisa remembered the Titan Ice Wars. Evacuating civilians under fire. Holding defensive positions against impossible odds, because retreat meant leaving people to die. She had fought battles where victory meant saving lives. The council commander had chosen his battlefield poorly. She contacted Admiral Blake, requested reinforcements. He authorized her to take 4 more battleships. 9 human battleships against 80 council warships. Still overwhelmingly outnumbered. Lisa had fought at worse odds. She set course for New Aurora at maximum speed. Vokesh detected the approaching human fleet and felt vindication. They were coming. His trap was working. He positioned his fleet in his new formation, not the traditional council patterns, but something designed specifically for human chaos. Overlapping spheres of coverage, no gaps. He had learned. This time, he was ready. Lisa arrived at New Aurora. The council fleet was positioned between her and the colony. Vokesh had indeed studied human tactics. His formation was good, better than anything they'd seen. But it was still a formation. It still assumed humans would fight the kind of battle Vokesh expected. She ordered her ships into a standard line formation, approaching at moderate speed. Vokesh watched, surprised. Humans fighting traditionally? Had they finally accepted that proper military doctrine was superior? His confidence swelled. He prepared his fleet. Then, when the human ships reached the range where Vokesh expected them to open fire, Lisa Grant gave an order that made no sense to council tactics. Full burn. Directly at the council flagship. All 9 human battleships accelerated to maximum velocity, straight toward Vokesh's massive dreadnought. Vokesh ordered his fleet to close and engage. His carefully rehearsed formation began to execute. And then Pete Hansen reported, in position. Amy Sullivan activated a system council intelligence had no record of humanity possessing. The plasma lances fired. Not the crude plasma weapons the council used. These were focused fusion reactions, channeled through magnetic containment fields, into beams that could burn through anything. Experimental. Developed in secret. Tested in the outer solar system. Now, tested in combat. Vokesh's flagship lost power as the plasma lance cored through its reactor section. The massive dreadnought went dark. 6 more Council ships died in the first salvo, armor and shields meaningless against weapons that brought the heart of a star to bear. The careful formation collapsed as ships maneuvered desperately. Lisa Grant pressed the attack. The 9 human battleships moved through the Council fleet in a pattern that looked random, but was a complex dance of mutual support. Each ship covered the others, each fired continuously. Danny Wright coordinated the fire, creating overlapping fields of destruction the Council ships couldn't escape. Railguns spoke continuously. Plasma lances burned. Missile salvos overwhelmed point defenses. The Council ships fought back, but their weapons were designed for the war they knew. Energy beams that the human armor could withstand. Missiles that the human point defense grids intercepted. A Kryn heavy cruiser landed a direct hit on one human battleship. The explosion tore through the aft section. The vessel lost power. Lisa marked it damaged. And continued the attack. No time to rescue the crew now. They would live or die by their damage control teams. The battle demanded her full attention. Vokesh tried to organize a retreat. His fleet was decimated. 37 ships destroyed. 26 crippled. He needed to preserve what remained. He ordered surviving vessels to jump to safety. But Danny Wright's tactical team had anticipated this. During the battle, human ships had deployed mines at the primary jump points. Council vessels trying to escape ran into nuclear weapons and concentrated railgun fire. More ships died. Vokesh's own flagship, on emergency power, barely managed to calculate an alternate jump solution and escape with 17 surviving vessels. The silence after the battle was profound. Lisa Grant sat in her command chair. New Aurora was safe. The Council fleet destroyed or scattered. But one human battleship was crippled, 3 more significantly damaged. Crew members had died. She would read their names, write to their families. Later. First, she needed to ensure the colony was secure, her fleet ready if Vokesh returned. Back at the peace negotiations, news of the battle arrived while Marvan and President Carter were still discussing terms. The High Council leader read the report. Her position had changed completely. The Council could continue this war. Send more fleets. Eventually, through sheer numbers, they might defeat humanity. But the cost would be staggering. And other species were watching. Seeing that the Council's military supremacy was not absolute. If the Council showed too much weakness, others might test it. Marvan looked at President Carter and made her decision. She accepted humanity's terms. Full independence. No Council jurisdiction. Reparations for war costs. And the public acknowledgement that the Council was not the galaxy's supreme military power. It was a bitter treaty for the Council. But the alternative was worse. The formal signing took place a week later. Marvan spoke first, acknowledging a new era. An era where military might wasn't measured by fleet size or traditions, but by effective tactics and the will to use them. President Helen Carter accepted the treaty, speaking of humanity's hopes for peaceful cooperation. But she made it clear, Earth sought no empire, no conquests. But humanity would defend itself, and its interests, with every means at their disposal. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do. Now they would see if humanity could build as well as it could destroy. Admiral Richard Blake attended the ceremony, but left early. He had work to do. The fleet needed rebuilding. New weapon systems tested. The war was over, but humanity's military could not rest. Other species would study what happened. Some would seek alliance. Others would seek advantage. Earth needed to be ready for both. Commodore Lisa Grant returned to Earth a hero. Parades, medals, speeches. She attended them, because orders were orders. But her mind was elsewhere. The dead crew members. The Council soldiers she had killed, just following orders. She wondered if there could have been a better way. Pete Hansen found her after the medal ceremony, looking at Earth through a viewport. "You all right, Cap?" Lisa said she was fine. They had won. Humanity was independent. That's what mattered. Pete pointed out she didn't sound convinced. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "Victory feels hollow when you understand its cost," she finally said. The council learned they had never really mastered war. They had mastered the appearance of war, the ceremonies and traditions. When they met a species that actually understood warfare in all its brutal efficiency, their 3,000 years of history meant nothing. She paused. But humanity knowing how to fight? That doesn't make the fighting good. It just makes humanity very dangerous. 6 months after the treaty, Marvan addressed the council again. They had grown complacent. Assumed their way was the only way. Forgotten that combat was survival. Species that fought for survival fought differently than those who fought for glory. The galaxy would have to change. The council would still exist, but not as supreme military authority. They would become what they should have always been, a forum for cooperation and mutual defense. Not rulers, but partners. It would take time for the proud species of the council to accept this. But the alternative was clear. Adapt, or face more conflicts with species like humanity who would fight on their own terms. Earth settled into its new role. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges. Human ships explored further. They encountered new species, some friendly, some not. When conflicts arose, humanity showed the same tactical brilliance and ferocity. But they also showed something else. Mercy. Captured council ships and crews were returned. Medical aid, reconstruction assistance offered to former enemies. Humanity had proven they could fight. Now they proved they could also build. Lisa Grant eventually retired from active service. She trained the next generation of officers. Tactics, strategy, the realities of combat. But also, she taught them this: fighting was sometimes necessary. Winning was important. But the goal was never the fighting itself. The goal was peace. Peace earned through strength, but peace nonetheless. Admiral Blake stood in the same command center where he had monitored first contact. Displays showed human ships moving freely, trading, exploring, defending. Not seeking conflict. He allowed himself to feel satisfied. The aliens claimed to master war. They had mastered nothing but tradition. Humanity showed them what real warfare looked like. And the galaxy was better for that harsh lesson. Not because war was good, but because understanding the true cost of war made peace more valuable. President Carter's successor gave a speech on the treaty's anniversary. Humanity's journey from isolated species to galactic power. Sacrifices made, lessons learned. She ended with a simple truth: humanity had proven themselves capable of terrible violence when necessary. Now they would prove themselves capable of building something better. The galaxy watched. Some with respect. Some with fear. Some with hope. Humanity had arrived. The old order had fallen. What came next would not be determined by tradition or ancient superiority, but by the choices each species made. And humanity had learned to make hard choices long before they ever reached the stars. They were here. And they were awesome. And terrifying. And undeniably, beautifully, here to stay.